So I'll start again then. All right. Like this. We got through chapter 6 of Mark last week. And this week we have, we'll get into 7. And what we kind of saw last week was we had the Herod stuff going on. We had Jesus feeding the 5,000, and it all kind of leads up. I think that whole kind of section leads up to this idea where they're on the boat, and Jesus wants. Is this the one where he just walks past them?
He's going to walk past.
He was going to walk past them, which is the weirdest phrase in the Bible, I think. Like, it's like, was Jesus trying to scare them or something like that? Like, oh, like over there. And they were scared, and he climbed the boat with them, and the wind died down, and they were completely amazed. So they're using that amazed word. That was the biggest thing I learned this last time doing this last sermon series. That amazed word and how it's connected to those women at the tomb when they see that it's empty. And then it says, for they did not understand about the loaves because their hearts were hardened. And you know, that's, I think that's connected to that idea of Herod, that Herod is not providing for them. Yet Jesus is the good shepherd. Jesus is the good shepherd, shepherding the flock. Herod is not being that. He's feeding the people and providing real needs for them. But the disciples are all missing that because their hearts are like Pharaoh. They're still in that other version of power. They're still in all of that. And so that section kind of ends with like this kind of quick little, like, and then he went through the whole region healing sick and, you know, all these things, marketplaces, and they begged him to let them touch even the edge of his cloak, and with all who touched it were healed, which again, we're kind of seeing that story of the woman who touched his cloak and all that in there too. So I do think this at the end of the chapter 6, with how it ends and all that stuff, is kind of a hard break. Like it kind of sounds like it. Like sounds like it's got a nice summary, you know, like it's just there, and then it's kind of starting a new idea, kind of going through. But as with all good literature, Mark builds off of previous ideas that were created. So we have chapter 7 now. Let's see, how far should we go into chapter 7? I did not prepare as well as I usually do for class. So you guys can tar and feather me and all that stuff. But
It's kind of short.
yeah, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. Let's see here. So we get Syrophoenician woman. We have the Pharisees getting all upset at Jesus, and then Jesus heals the deaf and mute man. Let's just read the whole chapter, and then we'll kind of go through it. And if we need to revisit some stuff, because again, all the stuff in here shows what is it's all connected. So one of the things that I want you to notice before we read it, when we get to the Syrophoenician thing, we've talked about her twice now. It's a pretty big story in the Gospel of Mark. Whenever one of the gospel writers or just a biblical writer tells you a detail about a person, it's important to like, well, what does that detail mean? So Syrophoenician, if you were an Israelite and all of that, you would have immediately recognized her, where she was from and who else was from that same thing. It's kind of like if I say, let's all go to Midland, Texas. Who comes to your mind when I say Midland, Texas? Does anyone? Bushes. Yeah, that's the Bushes over there. So they're from Midland, Texas, and stuff like that. And we associate places like that with people. So Syrophoenician. Does anyone remember who was from Syrophoenicia? Jezebel. Yeah. Jezebel and Ahab and that story and all that stuff. And we know that Jezebel is not a kind person, right? And so when we introduce this woman and we read the story, allow your mind to go into what the original readers would have done and went, ooh, Syrophoenician. I don't know if I trust her. All right. Like, so that should color you. Yeah.
I never heard that word. I pronounced it right because I used
the Syrophoenician. Yeah.
I didn't, that's like a city or a town?
Yeah. It's like a region, like, so you have like Phoenician. So you have like, that would be like, blanking right now of what it'd be like a Pharisee region, but you think about like, and then Syro is just another kind of title for the area. So like so Syrophoenician woman. So
I would picture it as a seacoast area.
Yeah. So like so Syrophoenician, this description distinguishes the original Phoenician homeland in Syria from
the north,
Libya, Phoenicia, and Phoenician settlements of North Africa. Since the time of Alexander, Greeks, including Macedonians, had constituted a ruling class of citizens. So Sidon is now considered themselves Greek. So that's what this thing says. So kind of just, so it's just like a region. A region and a type of people.
I never heard of Tyre or Sidon either.
Yeah.
Is that Lutheranism?
No. That's just more. No. That's just
pounds.
Yeah. So that it's just areas. So if someone was requesting a map, well, let me see if I can find a map real quick. Let's see here. Sidon. Images. So let's see here. All right, Zoom. Let me share my screen. Come on. There we go.
Yeah.
And then share. Okay. So let's see here. So that's a little one, but yeah, Tyre. Yeah. So you got like Tyre there. Let's see here. Here we go. So see this one right here, and so you got Sidon and Tyre here.
Oh yeah.
And so and you have like Jordan River and all the stuff that we know about.
Sidonians written right across the.
Yeah. Sidonians. So like that's So like that kind of tells you a little bit about.
Near the Mediterranean.
So you got Tyre and Sidon, you got Nazareth right here in Jerusalem. So it's kind of this area up here.
You knew, right, Ed?
And so yeah. Well, those are like port cities.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. The Israelis don't have many port cities, and so they're not really a seagoing people. So whenever you see kind of a port city, it's usually Greek people. So all right. So let's get into this. We'll read the entire chapter. So here I'll share the screen again.
I have to go back where I started from.
And back up so you don't hurt your eyes.
All right, here we go.
Then the Pharisees and some of the scribes came together to him, having come from Jerusalem. Now when they saw some of his disciples eat bread with defiled, that is, with unwashed hands, they found fault. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands in a special way, holding the tradition of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And there are many other things which they have received and hold, like the washing of cups, pitchers, copper vessels, and couches. Then the Pharisees and scribes asked him,
"Why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat bread with unwashed hands?"
Well did Isaiah prophesy of you, hypocrites, as it is written, "This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me, and in vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. For laying aside the commandment of God, you hold the tradition of men, the washing of pitchers and cups, and many other such things you do. All too well you reject the commandment of God, that you may keep your tradition. For Moses said, 'Honor your father and your mother,' And he who curses father or mother, let him be put to death. But you say, if a man says to his father or mother, whatever profit you might have received from me is korban, that is a gift to God, then you no longer let him do anything for his father or his mother, making the word of God of no effect through your tradition, which you have handed down, and many such things you do.
When he had called all the multitude to himself, he said to them,
Hear me, everyone, and understand. There is nothing that enters a man from outside which can defile him, but the things which come out of him, those are the things that defile a man. If anyone has ears to hear, let him hear.
When he had entered a house away from the crowd, his disciples asked him concerning the parable.
Are you thus without understanding also? Do you not perceive that whatever enters a man from outside cannot defile him? Because it does not enter his heart, but his stomach, and is eliminated, thus purifying all foods? What comes out of a man, that defiles a man. For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile a man.
From there, he arose and went to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And he entered a house and wanted no one to know it, but he could not be hidden. For a woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard about him, and she came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she kept asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter.
Let the children be filled first, for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs.
Yes, Lord. Yet even the little dogs under the table eat from the children's crumbs.
For this saying, go your way. The demon has gone out of you, daughter.
And when she had come to her house, she found the demon gone out, and her daughter lying on the bed. Again, departing from the region of Tyre and Sidon, he came through the midst of the region of Decapolis to the Sea of Galilee. Then they brought to him one who was deaf and had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to put his hand on him. And he took him aside from the multitude, and put his fingers in his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. Then, looking up to heaven, he sighed.
Ephphatha, be opened.
Immediately his ears were opened, and the impediment of his tongue was loosed, and he spoke plainly. Then he commanded them that they should tell no one. But the more he commanded them, the more widely they proclaimed it, and they were astonished beyond measure.
He has done all things well.
He makes both the deaf to hear and the mute to speak.
Okay. So this is a fun one. Like there's some fun stuff going on in here. So all right, so we'll just kind of start going through it. We'll ask the question, like, what did anyone notice anything that kind of stood out to them higher than other things that we need to make sure we talk about? Type of thing.
Astonishment again.
Astonishment again. It's cool as soon as you start seeing it, isn't it? Like that's it's like, oh, look at that. Like that's like I even noticed it now because we kind of realized that when we were in the midst of writing it, and now kind of going through it afterwards, it's like, gosh, it's everywhere, and it's you can kind of tell it's intentional. It's not on accident.
He keeps telling people to be quiet, but
they keep telling people to be quiet. I love that too, because it's so backwards than
is
what
that
we
what's
think.
called evangelism?
Yeah, like that's
Forced evangelism.
worst evangelism. Like that's and we can kind of talk about that a little bit too. So we'll remind that when we come up to it again.
Maybe he's afraid of getting stampeded.
Well, I think that has.
Or yes,
I think that has a lot to do with it. I think it has a lot to do with it, and I think it helps us kind of see things in a different light today too. But we'll talk about that when it comes here. But I think that's stampede. I think you're kind of right. Like, is there anything else?
God's commands versus man's traditions.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Like this whole thing. So we'll get into that here in 1 second, because that's kind of what this first whole section is about. And when we were talking about that, as we were reading this, I was like, wait a second, it's missing some words here. And I looked, and there's some words in the NIV that aren't in the King James around that. And so we'll get into that when we come into it, because it's important to remember Luke and Acts are related at the hip, like they are the same book. Acts is Luke 2, and so Mark doesn't have Acts. So the Cornelius story in Acts, where Peter sees that all foods are clean, and this is a big thing about. That's happening here in Mark, like that everything's kind of being declared clear, yeah. Like everything in Mark, it's so fast, it's so fast, and so like that's important to remember too. So the first thing I noticed in chapter 7 is suddenly we have different cast of characters. We have the Pharisees now; they're over there. The next 2 chapters are their stories here. So the Pharisees, they come together. In verse 2, it says this: now, when they saw some of his disciples eating bread with defiled, that is, unwashed hands. Now, I think this is interesting. I don't know if Mark's doing anything here, but I like to have fun with this stuff. Right above that, what did the disciples not understand? The loaves. All right. So like that idea of God kind of creating something out of nothing, like that God taking care of his people. Like there's some ideas that are kind of, at least in my mind, they're kind of concepts that I kind of understand, but I have a hard time articulating that they didn't understand about the loaves. And then suddenly it's not about them eating fish or anything like that. It's a very similar thing, like bread. Now, I don't know if we need to make that more than it is.
But that just happened. I mean, you fed all those other people. You think they just took it for granted that he'll do it again?
I know it does happen again, right? Like it doesn't. They
don't really say.
Yeah, it doesn't really say, and that's part of this Pharisee story. So we have feeding of the 5,000 with Herod. And then we have feeding the 4,000 with the Pharisees. And so that's.
I kind of think that the tie-in here is that Jesus didn't say, all right, all you people run down to the Jordan and wash your hands. We're going to break bread.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting that that's kind of a connected idea. And I have a feeling it's not on accident. These are doing all this amazing stuff and then now the Pharisees are like, you're going after the things, things that we like here. And I think it's interesting that Mark then, this book of the Bible that is always so fast. We called it snappy just a second ago. He spends half a paragraph here explaining what's going on. And I think if he's taking the time to explain what's going on, like he wants us who are reading this thousands of years later, but he wants people that are in different cultures and all that stuff to really understand what's going on here. So like you look at verse 3, he goes, for the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands, in a special way, holding to the tradition of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they don't eat unless they wash. And there are many other things which they have received and hold, like washing of cups, pitchers. Like he makes this whole, like it's odd. He doesn't explain really anything else except this. So I think it's showing us that this is a little bit more important, because I think we're getting to the point where Jesus is declaring all the things clean, and Mark is really wanting us to see that. And so we get right into the way, and Jesus quotes Isaiah. It was Isaiah 29, 29:13, that he says, "This people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commands of men." Like that's, and even when I read it out of Isaiah, it never stops. It never ceases to arrest me, like it's over there about what are the things that I am doing that I'm saying is of God, but really it's just me, like that's, and I look over the years of things that I used to believe, things that were bad systems of power in the church, that really did these, that they were like, this is what God says, and I think we talked about this a few weeks ago. So again, I'm just saying it for Gloria's, like it's, but it's, you're not making,
Safe ground.
But I was listening to someone on the radio. Man, I almost pulled the car over just a second to contemplate this, because I've always struggled with people that were so quick to say, well, the Bible says this, and they're so hard on it over there. And when I was listening to this person, they said, well, your reading of it is that. And if you're defending so hard, the Bible says this, what you're really defending is your reading of it. And I was like, that's the wording that I've always not had, where we can get so wrapped up in all this stuff when really we're just using the Bible to make it say what we want it to say.
Different interpretations. Everybody has their own.
Yeah, there's these different interpretations, and you bought the Hebrew Bible, right?
Yes.
And then in that Hebrew Bible, that thing will contradict itself.
Everybody else.
Yeah, it will say one thing on this other page, say something else, and they're perfectly fine with that. And because they want to have that tension, and that's and I think that's kind of what Jesus is. He's like, you Pharisees, you're being shepherds just like Herod is being a shepherd. That these people that you are just holding them under bondage, and it is the commandments of men. And then he gives an example, and it's this whole Corban example. And that Corban example would be like, let's say Scott, we'll pick on you. You have a son and you hate the son. You just hate him, and that son's going to get your inheritance and all that stuff. And you're like, yeah, no, can't do it. Do that, and so you just give it all to the church. Which, listen, we would appreciate.
Yeah,
we would.
Thank you.
That's basically what that Corban thing. So he won't touch it. They say he can't get it. This stuff still happens today. Yeah. Like that's.
We had one recently, didn't we?
Like without naming names.
No.
Yeah.
The estate that was the house that was given to the church to sell.
Oh, that was right before me.
Yeah.
That was right before me. That was one of those situations.
Yes, it was.
So yeah, that was that thing that happened right before I got here, which was over 5 years ago now. Like, so anyway, yeah. so that's, believe me, it surprises me. I've been here longer than I was in Arkansas. That blows my mind every time I think
Well,
about
I
it.
can understand that. Who'd want to stay in Arkansas?
So that's kind of what that Corbin idea is. And so Jesus is saying, let's say like, so verse 9, it's like, all too well you reject the commandments of God, that you keep your tradition. For Moses said, honor your father and mother, and you curse his father and mother, let him be put to death. But you say, the man says to his father and mother, whatever profit you might have received is Corbin. Like these, you're supposed to like take care of your parents, but you're going to devote it all to God. Like, it's like, come on, like, come on, like this isn't allowed. Lee, did you want to say something?
When he first speaks to the Pharisees,
Yeah.
when he said, well, did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites? The thought that went through my mind was, if he was standing here today, he'd be saying, look who's calling the kettle black.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the first time he says to them, it's not only me telling you you're hypocrites, but let's look back to our great prophets, Isaiah, and he's telling you you're doing it.
Yeah. Because, I mean, that was Ezekiel, Amos. Oh, my goodness. Amos does this so much. And Isaiah does it where it has this sense of like your worship is meaningless. Like that's all. You take so much pride in this temple. And over there, and Jesus kind of leans into that later when he's like, we can just tear it down. We could just tear it down. And so they take so much pride in it. And that's, and again, it goes to ourselves where it's like, what part of the faith am I taking undue pride in? Is it that it has to look just like this? Is it that it has to look like over there? I'm never going to be happy until it's like that. Is it, it could be anything, everything. And then this next part is pure Jesus gold, because our English translations, I don't know, you guys heard me chuckling, like our English translations, well, just the translations in general, are sanitized from what I think Jesus was actually saying. But before we get into that, so he says this, and he keeps talking about it. So verse 14, kind of halfway through, he goes, called everyone to him. He says, hear me, everyone, and understand. There is nothing that enters a man from outside which can defile him. But the things which come out of him, those are the things that defile him. So like he's starting to set up the things that come out of you defile you. Now, if this was today, he would say, some of you have to wipe more than others in what is being defiled. And you're going to see, like, that's basically what he's saying. He's saying here, like he goes, you're so worried about doing the right things that you're missing the entire boat of this whole thing. And then he says this, verse 16, and this is important. If anyone has ears to hear, let him hear. All right. And we can allow that to be proverby and all that stuff, which is great. I think it is. But after the Syrophoenician woman, what's the guy's affliction that Jesus heals? You remember? He's deaf and mute.
Yeah.
And I think when we get to that, the same way that Jesus heals blind men and stuff like that, he's going, this deaf man can hear it. Can you hear it? Like that's like, it's super clever writing. It's super clever. Like, it's like, this deaf man can hear it. Can you hear it? Like or are you going to just keep on going in your same path? Like, that's cool. That's good. It's good. Like, it's like I was chuckling at the end. I'm like, gosh, it's good writing. So,
what's interesting with the ELCA study Bible is they omit verse 16 entirely.
Oh, do they?
Instead, they say in what they list as 14, and said, to
Oh,
them,
yeah.
listen to me, all of you, and understand. And then 15, there is nothing outside.
Interesting. So like that could have been, so the little note here in this one, where is it at? 23.
It says 14 to 23 here, the issue of virtue.
Interesting.
Continue to be a concern.
Interesting. So like this, all right. So we're going to start looking up. There's all kinds of stuff in here. Hold on, everyone on Zoom. Hold on. All right. So let's see here. Mark 6. Oh, 7. And then 16. Let's see. We'll do 14.
14 to 16. 14 to 17.
Bible Hub should come up. All right, everyone on the Zoom, I'll get you over here now that I can see it. Let's see your share screen over here. So let's see here. So they have it in here in this one. In this one. So it's.
Well, this is second edition too.
16 was eliminated.
Okay, so the ESV Bible, you guys have it. Does it have 16 in that?
No, it doesn't. I just realized that.
Yeah, she's got the same ESV.
Yeah, and I noticed that.
Yeah.
What you read
So that's
Wasn't there yet.
okay. So cool. So so all right, cool deal. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. So cool deal. But it's my original thesis is still like that story at the end, and maybe a bit later manuscripts added it to bring in kind of like so that you won't miss this, you know, with the stuff at the end, because a bunch of those stories is also where Jesus heals someone of sight, and it's like this blind man sees. Do you see?
You have New King James? Is that what you're?
That's what the New King James right here. And that's what the readings is. And then I have NIV right here. And so then they've got the ESVs. So this is
King James.
This is an old King James.
King James. She's translating.
Bible's been around for a while.
But this
I got this Bible in 1979, so it's.
no man. That Bible's 3 years older than me.
I have a half a dozen Bibles, but this is one I'm familiar with to read.
Yeah.
Sorry to say.
My mother was
My
the
study
one
Bible is
the real
so small.
Bible.
The old one, right? Yeah.
It's bought me a large print, but that was also a King James.
Yeah.
So I do read that one at home too, but this one is the one I'm familiar with.
That's good. All right. So we'll continue talking about these verses here. So right after the one that's kind of omitted. So verse 17, when he entered the house away from the crowd, his disciples asked him concerning the parable. So he said to them, and so he's just talking to the disciples, are you thus without understanding also? Do you not perceive whatever enters a man from the outside cannot defile him, but it does not enter his heart, but his stomach, and is eliminated. Like how does the expelled? Like those are, there's other words that are used.
Goes out into the sewer.
When it goes out into the sewer.
Yeah. Out to the drop.
Yeah.
Purging all.
Yeah. And so then he says it again. What comes out of a man is what defiles him. Like some of you need to wipe more than others, you know, like it's what comes out of you there. And then he says, because from within the heart, proceeds evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications. And it's like the list. These things come out and defile him. And so he's kind of equating your bodily emissions to what all this other stuff that comes out of you.
You are what you eat.
Yeah, like that's, and so I think that's kind of fascinating, and I never read it that way until this last year, and that it comes out like that, and so he's basically saying that these Pharisees and that our own religious righteousness is so concerned about like making sure all the right stuff comes into
All that ritual.
Yeah, all that ritual is all that anything, and we can fall in these same traps where we just become part of like our like American Christian echo chambers, and we never hear another thing outside of it, and we get so consumed where it's like I only need to hear stuff from that. That's what I was taught in youth group growing up. Only pay attention to these things. It's if you look at anything else, it's going to be awful, right? So.
Yeah, I went to youth group a lot before you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was things taught like, if somebody invites you to a Catholic church.
Oh yeah. Oh, the battle. Well, I think so. That's a good example, because like no matter what happens, we always will create in groups and out groups. If we get stuck in this building, in this room with just the 5 of us and Lee and Cheryl on this TV screen, we would probably kick out the Zoom people first. And then we would discover more in groups and out groups. That's just how society works. And like, so it was Catholic back then, and it's slowly like expanded and all that stuff. And it seems like Jesus is like, stop it. like that. That's there's other more pressing things to worry about. Like that's, and so then he goes to like the queen of the outcasts, the queen of the outcasts. So we're talking about like, hey, it's not what goes, it's not what comes in, it's what defiles you. Some of you need to wipe more than others. And all these other things is part of your SH9T life, like all that stuff. And then we get to the Syrophoenician woman, who's Greek, who's probably eating pork, who's doing all the wrong things, right? And she's the wrong type of person. And Jesus and his reaction to her is fascinating here. So verse 26, like the woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she kept asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter. That implies like continued action. Oh yeah, I remember what I was going to check before we looked into this. I'm sorry. I wanted to look at that verse. No, we already looked at it. No, we didn't. We didn't. Which one was it? Oh, it was 19. I wanted to look at 19. It's probably in the Greek, because the Greek usually keeps everything. And so let's see here. Oh, that's the sewer. Because in the NIV it's saying, in saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean.
Yeah, that's who declared all foods.
And that's not in the King James. That's not in the King James.
It's in parentheses in this.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if they're kind of and something there. Sorry for everyone on the.
You mean Mark didn't write it?
No. No, that's not how any of this works. Oh, okay. So they put it on. Okay, yeah. So it's not in the interlinear here on the online. Okay, I just want to look at that real quick. So I need to start bringing in my Greek New Testament. I can't really read it, but it would show us some stuff. So we get in the Syrophoenician woman, and she begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter, and then think about what Jesus says. This is such a weird. Before I say anything, I want to get your guys' read of it. So, but Jesus said to her, this is verse 27, let the children be filled first, for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs or the dogs. What do you think he's saying there? I have strong ideas about what he's saying.
I have no idea. But
You have no.
the quote says he was referring to the children as being the Jewish people,
Yeah,
and that he should be serving them first.
yeah,
And the dogs are pets, not like wild dogs.
yeah. It's like the little dogs and and that's so yeah. So and that's definitely the sense to it here. So yeah, the children are like children of Israel.
Right.
You let the children be filled first, which is interesting because he kind of seems to be pushing against this insider outsider language up in here with the defilement and all. And it's like, why? What in the world, Jesus, are you doing? Like it seems kind of hateful there.
I didn't take it that way, Pastor.
All right. Well, how did you take it?
I took it like frustration.
Oh, okay.
Like here I'm trying to give it to the chosen people. And,
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting read.
Everybody else is running to me, and the Jews are looking to kill me.
Yeah.
I think that he was just trying to be a good shepherd, because in our family, we always had the kids eat first. My mother never ate till everyone else was done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's calling this woman a dog.
Yeah.
Like that's, and maybe like a little dog, like a pet, but still.
This note here says, since dogs were scavenging animals, comparing someone to a dog could be seen as an insult. In any case, the woman is determined to give Jesus to help her daughter.
Well, and even in our culture today, dog is still an insult.
Yeah.
Even though people will spend thousands of dollars to save their dog, like if they need to, right? It's still, even these beloved animals, if you're called a dog, it's still an insult type of thing. And so I have a feeling that's still kind of prevalent back then too. But I think this story is written the way it is. And that's interesting to like, that it's not Jesus like just throwing out insults, but kind of he's more frustration type of thing. That's an interesting read of it. And but verse 28, but she answers him, says, yes, Lord, but even the little dogs, even the dogs under the table, eat from the children's crumbs. And that right there, because that lady, even though Jesus maybe demeaned her a little bit, didn't seek to raise her up in a raise herself up in a prideful sense. She was completely willing to stay humble and yet say, yet the dogs are fed eating from the scraps of the table. And that right there, I think is what Mark is talking about, and wanting us to kind of see, like, these Pharisees are so interested in pridefully lifting themselves up and going, this is how you be holy. And the Syrophoenician woman, the Jezebel lady, says, even the scraps that fall off all those prideful people's tables are enough. Like that's so. And Jesus then goes, for saying this, the demons left your daughter. And then that goes into that same thing that we've already been seeing, that your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Like your faith has made you well. I don't know. Does anyone have any thoughts about that? This is wild.
My study Bible says that it refers also to Matthew 15:26, where it says, it is not right to give the children's food to the dogs.
Yeah. It's probably the same similar story in Matthew. Yeah. It's the same. It's the same set of stuff that comes out.
Yeah.
Let's see.
21 through 20.
Yeah, it's the same story that they don't. Yeah, it's the same story. So, all right. So yeah, like that's,
It's the whole thing.
yeah, it's very similar, the whole thing. So, but it's fascinating here. And I think it says something about the pride and going against that, and I think he's what I hear coming from all of this is you have these Pharisees that are taking pride in everything that they're doing, and yet this Gentile woman who doesn't have pride in anything, doesn't accept pride in anything, and yet she's the one that's leaving healed. And then it's almost like Jesus then heals that deaf man, the deaf and mute man, and it's like, do you hear it? Do you hear what we're saying? The deaf man hears. Do you hear it? Do you hear it? And then we have that whole thing where where he tells him not to say anything, and he says everything, and like that's, to me, what I hear is, because I would constantly grew up here. It's like you gotta tell people about Jesus, tell people about Jesus, tell people about Jesus. And that's true. That's true. But like at some point, I think it comes off as desperate. And I think if our telling looked more like something rather than just empty words, we might actually tell more. Like that's over there. But I'm kind of in evangelism mode. That's what the sermon series is about. So that's
Tell your neighbors about Jesus, and if necessary, use words.
yeah. That's
You can tell through deeds.
that's oh man. It's the guy with the prayer. Gosh, it's right there. I'm just gonna move on. It's bugging me. So that's kind of what this chapter is. And chapter 8 is all kind of the same ideas. We have Jesus feeding the 4,000, which is saying something a little different than it is in the other one, and we'll get to that because we are pretty much out of time now. And so it's this whole section that, oh yeah, see, this one's so much fun because Mark combines Pharisees and Herod so that you cannot be confused about what he's talking about. And then after he combines Pharisees and Herod, we get Peter confessing Christ, which Peter's then quoting that bit about Herod, and he's trying to live a life of the Pharisees. And the whole section ends with, take up your cross and follow me in the transfiguration. So it's a cool section, but we'll have to talk about it next week. I don't think I have anything going on next week. Let's see, make sure. Nope. Looks like a normal day. So all right, but that's kind of what. Anyone have any last thoughts? Well, thanks. I'm gonna sign off for the online stuff. I realize I haven't been doing that, and it just ends. So thanks for joining us today. All right. Did anyone have any